It started with something so innocent, you wouldn't believe it. A favor. Just a simple everyday act of helpfulness around the house. If you'd told me then, back at the beginning, where that small favor would eventually lead, the kind of betrayal it would become the doorway to, I would have laughed in your face. I would have said it was impossible, ridiculous, something that could never, ever happen to me. But it did. It happened to me. And it started with something so utterly, unbelievably ordinary. My name is John, and this is the story of how my world, my marriage, my family, the whole damn thing, started to unravel, thread by agonizing thread, with a simple act of helpfulness. My wife Sarah and I, we've been married for 15 years. 15 years, a long time, a good time, I thought. We'd built a life together, a comfortable life, a life I believed in. And I had a stepson, Michael, Sarah's son from her first marriage. He was in his early 20s, just starting out, living not too far away, still figuring things out, like most kids his age. Our marriage wasn't some fairy tale romance. No marriage is, not after 15 years. But it was solid, comfortable, reliable. At least, that's how it felt from where I was standing. Sarah and I, we had our routines, our habits, our comfortable silences. We were stable. That was the word I'd use. Stable. And in my book, stable was good. Stable was what you aimed for. Stable was safe. And Michael, well, Michael was fine. He was a good kid, as far as stepsons go. Respectful, generally kept to himself, always polite to me. We had a decent enough relationship. Maybe not father-son close, but amicable, cordial, no drama. And that was fine too. That was normal. Then Sarah started having trouble with her back. Just a nagging ache at first, she said. Nothing serious. But it got worse, slowly, steadily, until it started to impact everything she did. Everyday tasks became a struggle. Lifting groceries, carrying laundry, even just bending down to pick something up off the floor. It became painful for her. She mentioned it one day, almost in passing over dinner, how much she was struggling, how the yard work was piling up, how she just couldn't manage the heavier chores around the house anymore, with her back acting up like this. And that's when Michael stepped in, always eager to please his mom, always wanting to be helpful, always the good kid, trying to do the right thing. He overheard Sarah talking about her back, about the yard work, about the things she was struggling with. And without hesitation, without even being asked directly, he offered to help. To take care of the lawn, he said, to weed the garden, to help with any of the heavier chores around the house that Sarah couldn't manage. Just a son being helpful to his mother, right? A good kid doing a good deed, innocent enough, seemed perfectly normal, perfectly reasonable, perfectly harmless. And so it began. That seemingly innocent favor. Michael started coming over more often, once a week to mow the lawn, then twice a week to tackle the garden. Then suddenly he was just around more, not just for the yard work anymore. He'd offer to fix things around the house, little things that Sarah had been putting off, a leaky faucet, a sticking door, a loose shelf in the garage. He was helpful, incredibly helpful, always cheerful, always willing to lend a hand, always smiling that easy, friendly smile. Sarah was grateful, relieved to have the help, to have the load lifted off her shoulders, both literally and figuratively. I was grateful too, honestly. It took a load off my shoulders as well, especially with my own busy work schedule. It seemed like a win-win situation. A son helping his mother, a family pulling together, easing the burden on Sarah, making life a little easier for all of us. Perfectly normal, perfectly innocent. What could possibly be wrong with that? That's what I told myself. That's what I believed. Then, before I knew, before I saw, before the whole carefully constructed facade of normalcy started to crumble, revealing the darkness hidden beneath the surface of that seemingly helpful favor. But gradually, almost like the slow creep of shadows lengthening in the afternoon, things started to shift, subtly at first, so subtly you might not even notice if you weren't paying close attention. But I started to notice. Little things at first, then bigger things. And the innocent, helpful favor started to feel less innocent. Michael's visits became more frequent, and they started to last longer. It wasn't just about mowing the lawn anymore, or fixing that leaky gutter. The chores would get done quickly enough. He was efficient, I'll give him that. But then he'd linger. He'd stay for coffee afterwards, joining Sarah in the kitchen, the two of them chatting while I got ready for work, or tinkered in the garage, or did whatever I was doing. Then coffee turned into lunch sometimes. Then lunch stretched into dinner, especially if I was working late. He and Sarah would just be together. Just the two of them in the house for hours sometimes, while I was at work, or busy with my own projects, or simply not around. Looking back, it's like I can see the opportunities forming now, see the space opening up, the vacuum being created where something else could develop. The helpful favor, the constant presence, the increasing amount of shared time alone in the house. It was like a breeding ground, a petri dish for something inappropriate to take root, to grow, to flourish, all while I remained blissfully, stupidly oblivious. The innocent act of kindness, the simple offer of help, it became the perfect cover, the perfect camouflage for something far more insidious to blossom, unnoticed, unchallenged, right under my own roof. And Sarah? Sarah started to change too. Again, subtly at first, almost imperceptibly. But the changes were there, if you knew where to look, if you were paying attention, if you weren't too blinded by your own comfortable assumptions to see what was really happening right in front of you. She seemed brighter. That's the only way I can describe it. Brighter, more cheerful, more energetic than she had been in months, maybe even years. The weariness that had seemed to settle over her, the quiet resignation I'd seen in her eyes for so long, it started to lift. She was laughing more, smiling more. She seemed lighter, younger almost. Like a weight had been lifted, like she'd rediscovered some spark of joy, some forgotten energy that I hadn't seen in her in ages. At first, I was happy for her. Honestly, I was. Relieved that her back pain seemed to be improving, that she was feeling better, more like her old self. I told myself it was just the relief of having help around the house, the stress being lifted, the simple pleasure of having her son around more often. That's what I wanted to believe. That's what I told myself. But deep down, beneath the surface of that easy explanation, a small, uneasy feeling started to stir, a tiny prickle of something. Discomfort, disquiet, suspicion. I couldn't quite name it, couldn't quite define it, but something felt off, something felt wrong. And then there were the little things, the tiny, seemingly insignificant details that, in retrospect, scream out now like blaring sirens, warning signs I was too foolish, too trusting, too willfully blind to see at the time. The way Sarah would light up, just a fraction of a second quicker, just a shade brighter, when Michael arrived, a subtle shift in her whole demeanor that I somehow missed or chose to ignore. The lingering looks they'd exchange across the kitchen island, across the dinner table, even when I was right there in the room, a fleeting connection in their eyes that felt too intimate, too knowing, too private. The inside jokes that started to pepper their conversations, jokes I wasn't in on, laughter that felt exclusive, shutting me out, creating a little world just for the two of them, a little bubble of shared understanding and private amusement that I wasn't invited into. Boundaries started to blur, slowly, subtly, almost invisibly. Michael started calling Sarah more often, just to check in, he'd say, or to ask her opinion on something, or just to chat. Not always about chores, not always about yard work, just casual calls, friendly calls, calls that seemed to stretch on longer than necessary. And Sarah? Sarah started confiding in him, sharing things about her day, her frustrations at work, her worries about the house, her little everyday feelings, things she used to share with me, things that were once the currency of our daily connection, the small intimacies that built a marriage, but hadn't been shared between us in so long. She was sharing them with him now, with my stepson. It was subtle, it was gradual, it was insidious, creeping in like a slow-acting poison, contaminating everything, changing everything, blurring all the lines I thought were solid, unbreakable. And I was too oblivious, too trusting, too blind to see where it was all leading, to see the danger signs flashing right in front of my eyes, to see the betrayal slowly, silently, taking root right there, in my own home, under my own roof, disguised as a helpful favor. That uneasy feeling in my gut, that persistent prickle of wrongness, it just wouldn't go away. It burrowed deeper, day after day, gnawing at me constantly, a relentless whisper in the back of my mind that was slowly, inexorably turning into a shout. The subtle changes in Sarah's behavior, the little things that had initially just felt off, they became less subtle, more blatant, more impossible to ignore. The private jokes, the lingering looks, the hushed conversations that would abruptly stop when I walked into the room. They weren't just fleeting moments anymore. They were becoming the norm. They were happening more and more often, more openly, more carelessly, as if they'd become so comfortable in their secret little world that they'd forgotten or simply stopped caring about hiding it from me. And then there was Sarah's phone. That damn phone. She became possessive of it, secretive, always keeping it face down on the table, as if hiding something from my view. Always quick to minimize apps, to lock the screen, to turn away if I even glanced in her direction when she was using it. She started getting text notifications at all hours, late at night, early in the morning, times when it just felt inappropriate. And she'd always smile that secret little smile when she looked at them, a smile that wasn't for me, a smile that held a private meaning I wasn't privy to. She started going out more too, claiming errands, appointments, girls' nights out that just didn't quite add up, stories that felt flimsy, rehearsed, lacking in detail. My carefully constructed wall of denial, the wall I had built so diligently to protect myself from the truth, it started to crumble, brick by agonizing brick, piece by painful piece. The uneasy feeling in my gut was no longer just a whisper. It was a constant, agonizing ache, a cold certainty settling deep in my bones that something was terribly, irrevocably wrong. The discovery itself, it was a complete accident, brutally, agonizingly, devastatingly accidental. Just one of those random chance moments that can change the course of your entire life in a single, heart-stopping instant. It was a Tuesday morning. I remember it vividly. Sarah was rushing around the kitchen, getting ready for work, slightly flustered because she was running late. In her hurry, she left her phone on the kitchen counter, just lying there, face up, unlocked, vulnerable. And it buzzed. Just a quick, soft vibration against the countertop. Easily missed, easily ignored, but I heard it. And I saw the notification pop up on the screen. Just a text message preview, a few words flashing briefly before the screen went dark again. Just a name, flashing at the top of the message preview, Michael. Innocent enough, right? Just a name, just a text message. Perfectly explainable, perfectly normal, perfectly harmless, right? That's what I should have thought. That's what any reasonable person would have thought. But something made me pick it up. I don't know what it was. Curiosity, morbid fascination, a desperate last-ditch attempt to prove my suspicions wrong, to reassure myself that I was just being paranoid, that I was just imagining things, that everything was fine, normal, stable. Or maybe it was just a nagging, persistent, undeniable intuition, a cold certainty that I couldn't ignore any longer, a dark premonition that told me, with chilling clarity, that the answer I was dreading, the truth I was so desperately trying to avoid, was waiting for me, right there, in that small, innocuous device lying on the kitchen counter. I don't know, but I picked it up. Sarah's phone, my wife's phone, the phone that held the key to shattering my world. The message itself, the preview I had seen, it wasn't overtly incriminating, just something casual, something friendly. Morning, hope you have a good day. Simple enough, innocent enough. But the tone, even in those few short words, even in that fleeting preview, the tone felt different. Softer, more intimate than it should have been, between a stepson and a stepmother. And something inside me just snapped. Something broke. Something gave way. The dam of denial I had so carefully constructed, so desperately maintained, finally, irrevocably, burst. And I started scrolling up. Without even thinking, without even consciously making the decision to do it, my thumb just started moving, dragging the screen upwards, revealing the previous messages, the earlier conversations, the hidden history of communication between my wife and my stepson. And then, the truth hit me. Full force, like a punch to the gut. like a bucket of ice water thrown in my face in the dead of winter. The messages, they were explicit, undeniable, no room for doubt, no room for misinterpretation, no room for clinging to the desperate hope that I was just imagining things, that I was just being paranoid, that everything was still okay, still normal, still stable. Flirtatious texts, late-night messages, secret rendezvous planned in agonizing detail, pet names exchanged like whispered secrets in the dark, emojis used in ways that made my stomach churn with nausea, all the sickening cliches of an affair, all the predictable tropes of betrayal laid bare on that small, brightly lit phone screen. My wife and my stepson. Those two names, those two people, linked together in a way that was so profoundly, so disgustingly wrong. The words burned into my brain, seared into my memory, each message a fresh stab wound to my heart, each line of text a hammer, blow to the fragile foundations of my life, my marriage, my family. I scrolled and scrolled, my thumb moving mechanically, relentlessly, each message confirming my worst fears, each line of text tearing away another layer of my carefully constructed reality, exposing the ugly, rotten truth beneath the surface of my comfortable, stable, safe world. Disbelief warred with nausea, with a cold, creeping dread that spread through my entire body, numbing my limbs, stealing my breath, making my vision swim. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. Not to me, not to my life, not to my marriage. But it was. It was right there, on the screen, undeniable, irrefutable, devastatingly, heartbreakingly real. My world crumbled in that kitchen. The familiar, comfortable space suddenly felt alien, hostile, contaminated. My hands started shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone, the small device suddenly feeling heavy, burning hot in my trembling grasp. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring the screen, distorting the already sickening words, blurring everything around me, the kitchen, the sunlight streaming through the window, the whole, once familiar world dissolving into a watery, distorted mess of pain and disbelief. I felt sick, physically, violently sick, betrayed to my core, utterly, completely, irrevocably broken. And then, as if summoned by the devil himself, as if the universe was conspiring to inflict the maximum amount of pain in the most cruelly efficient way possible, Sarah walked back into the kitchen, humming softly under her breath, completely oblivious, utterly unaware of the bomb that had just detonated in my hands, the explosion that had just ripped apart the foundations of our lives. She walked in, smiling, ready to start her day, ready to continue the carefully constructed performance of normalcy, of happy wife, of loving stepmother, of faithful partner, completely unaware that the performance was over, that the curtain had just fallen, that the truth was out, raw and ugly and undeniable. She saw my face, just one look at my face, at my tear-streaked cheeks, at the phone clutched in my shaking hand, at the devastation etched into every line of my expression. She saw my face, saw the phone in my hand, and the humming stopped, abruptly, cut off mid-note, leaving only a chilling silence hanging in the air. Her smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second, then vanished completely, replaced by a look of dawning horror, of stark, naked, undeniable fear. She knew, instantly, without a single word being spoken, without a single accusation being uttered, she knew. That I knew. And in that silent, devastating, world-shattering moment, the confrontation began. Even before a single word was spoken, even before the first tear fell, even before the first shout of rage echoed through the suddenly suffocating silence of our kitchen. The silence in the kitchen after Sarah saw my face, after she realized I knew, it was thick, suffocating, charged with a tension so palpable you could almost reach out and touch it. Then it shattered. Not with a bang, not with shouting or screaming, not at first, but with a raw, choked question, barely a whisper, torn from my own throat, a sound that was more pain than words. What is this, Sarah? I managed to choke out, my voice cracking, breaking apart like shattered glass, the phone shaking violently in my trembling hand, pointed accusingly, mutely, at her, at the screen that held the undeniable, devastating truth. Her initial reaction was predictable, I suppose. Denial. Pure, instinctive, panicked denial. Her eyes widened, her face paling even further, if that was possible. She took a step back, as if recoiling from me, from the phone, from the very air itself. "John, what are you talking about? What's wrong?" Her voice was high, strained, a thin, brittle thread of sound that was already starting to unravel. Stammered excuses followed, clumsy, desperate, utterly unconvincing. "It's not what it looks like. You're misunderstanding. You're jumping to conclusions. Michael is just a friend. We were just joking around. It's nothing, John. Really, it's nothing." Lies. Pathetic, transparent, utterly useless lies, crumbling even as she spoke them, dissolving into the heavy, truth-laden air of that kitchen. Desperate attempts to explain away the undeniable, to erase the irrefutable evidence staring back at her from her own phone screen, from my broken, accusing eyes. But the lies? They were flimsy things, weren't they? Paper walls against a tidal wave. They crumbled quickly, inevitably, under the sheer crushing weight of the truth. My silence, my unwavering gaze, locked on hers, holding her accountable, refusing to let her look away, refusing to let her escape the reality of what she had done. The damning evidence, still glowing brightly in my trembling hand, a silent, irrefutable witness to her betrayal. It was too much. The weight of her own guilt, the weight of my shattered trust, the weight of the undeniable truth. It broke her. The denials faltered, then stopped altogether, choked off in her throat. The bravado, the flimsy facade of innocence crumbled completely, dissolving into a torrent of tears. Tears streamed down her face, unchecked, unbidden, a flood of guilt and shame and regret pouring out of her, washing away the last vestiges of her carefully constructed lies. She sank into a chair, her body collapsing in on itself, her shoulders shaking with convulsive sobs. And then the confession began. Broken, fragmented, barely coherent at first, the words spilled out of her, a torrent of whispered admissions, of choked apologies, of weak justifications and pathetic excuses. The helpful favor, the innocent chats, the blurred lines, the unintentional escalation, the slow, insidious slide into betrayal, the whole sickening, sordid story poured out of her in broken pieces, jagged shards of truth and deceit and self-pity, each piece twisting the knife deeper into my already shattered heart, each whispered word a fresh wave of nausea washing over me. And then anger erupted. Not from her. Not yet. From me. Raw, untamed, volcanic rage. A fury that had been simmering beneath the surface since I'd first picked up that phone, finally exploding, erupting with a force that shook the very foundations of our home, our lives, our carefully constructed world. Years of trust, years of love, years of shared life, all reduced to ashes, incinerated in the white-hot flames of her betrayal. Yelling, accusations hurled like weapons, sharp, jagged, aimed to wound, to inflict pain as deep and as agonizing as the pain I was feeling. Recriminations echoing through the kitchen, bouncing off the walls, filling the air with a thick, toxic cloud of pain and fury and disbelief. The house, our home, the place that was supposed to be our sanctuary, our safe haven, became a battleground, echoing with the sounds of our shattered world, the sounds of a marriage tearing itself apart, thread by agonizing thread. And beneath the rage, beneath the shouting, beneath the accusations, there was something else too, something colder, emptier, even more devastating than the fury, heartbreak. A cold, hollow ache that settled deep in my chest, a crushing weight that stole the air from my lungs, that stole the light from my eyes, that stole the very breath from my body. Devastation. Complete and utter devastation. Everything I thought I knew, everything I believed in, everything I had built my life upon, all the foundations of my world, gone. Reduced to ashes, scattered to the wind, obliterated by a helpful favor, by a betrayal so profound, so unexpected, so wrong. And in the echoing silence that followed the storm of rage, In the hollow emptiness that settled in the ruins of my shattered life, all that remained was the cold, stark, undeniable reality of what I had just discovered: my wife, my stepson, and the irreparable, unforgivable betrayal that had just blown our world apart. Where am I now? Months have passed, seasons have changed. Life, in its relentless way, has kept moving forward, even though mine feels like it's been stuck in place, frozen in that moment of discovery, that moment of shattering betrayal in our kitchen. The dust has settled in a way. The shouting has stopped. The tears have dried, or at least they don't fall quite as often now. But the silence that remains, the emptiness that echoes through the house, through my life, that's deafening. That's permanent. My marriage, it's over. Completely, irrevocably, finally over. There was no salvaging it, no patching it up, no pretending that anything could ever be the same again. The trust, once so carelessly shattered, lies in fragments, scattered beyond repair. The pain of that betrayal, the raw, agonizing wrongness of it all. It's too deep, too ingrained, too much a part of me now to ever truly fade. We're divorced. The house is sold. The life we built, the future we planned, the 15 years we shared, gone. Wiped clean. Reduced to nothing but memories, now tainted, poisoned, forever shadowed by the ugliness of what happened, by the betrayal that started with a helpful favor. Michael, he's vanished, just gone, disappeared from our lives as completely as if he'd never existed at all. The helpful stepson, the cheerful kid who was always around, the seemingly innocent young man who offered to lend a hand. Revealed, finally, as a key player in the destruction of my family, as a willing participant in the betrayal that tore my marriage apart. I haven't seen him since that day in the kitchen, haven't spoken to him, haven't heard from him, and I don't know if I ever will, or if I ever want to. The thought of seeing him again, of facing him again, of even hearing his name, it just fills me with a cold, simmering rage that I can barely contain. So, that's where I am now. Picking up the pieces, trying to rebuild a life from the wreckage, trying to navigate a world that suddenly feels unfamiliar, unsafe, and profoundly, heartbreakingly lonely. And in the quiet solitude of this new, unwanted reality, I've had a lot of time to think, to reflect, to try and make sense of it all, to try and find some meaning in the madness, to try and extract some kind of lesson from the devastation that has consumed me. And in the end, through all the pain and confusion and regret, I've come to understand some things, some hard things, some painful, unavoidable truths that this whole unimaginable ordeal has forced me to confront. Because this devastating betrayal, this unbelievable scenario that started with a simple, seemingly innocent, helpful favor, it taught me some agonizing, unforgettable lessons. Lessons etched in loss, lessons learned in the crucible of heartbreak, lessons that I'll carry with me for the rest of my days. And the first and most bitter lesson is this: betrayal can blossom in the most unexpected places and disguise itself in the most innocent forms. Infidelity isn't always some dramatic, passionate affair that starts with stolen glances in a smoky bar. Sometimes it creeps in slowly, insidiously, disguised as something kind, something helpful, something perfectly, utterly normal. You think you're safe, you think you're protected, you think you know the people in your life, and then, out of nowhere, betrayal blooms in your own backyard, in your own home, masked as a simple act of helpfulness. And that leads to the second painful truth. Blurred boundaries are dangerous ground, especially within families. Familiarity, comfort, constant proximity, even within the seemingly safe confines of family dynamics, can create opportunities, can open doorways, can pave the way for boundaries to blur, for lines to be crossed, for inappropriate connections to form. If you're not vigilant, if you're not careful, if you're not constantly aware of the subtle shifts and unspoken tensions that can fester beneath the surface of everyday life. Thirdly, and this one is hard to swallow, but undeniably true, trust in its purest, most unquestioning form can sometimes be blindness. Trust is essential in a marriage, in any relationship, yes. But blind trust, unquestioning faith, That can be a dangerous thing. That can leave you vulnerable, exposed, utterly unprepared for the kind of deception and betrayal that you never, in your wildest nightmares, see coming. It's not about being paranoid. It's not about being suspicious of everyone. It's about being aware, paying attention, listening to that quiet voice in your gut that tells you when something feels off, when something doesn't quite add up, when something just isn't right. The fourth painful lesson, and this one still stings with a particular kind of bitter irony. Seemingly small acts, even acts of kindness, can have devastating unforeseen consequences. A simple offer of help, a well-intentioned favor, a seemingly harmless act of generosity. It can inadvertently set in motion a chain of events that lead to profound betrayal, to irreparable damage, to the complete and utter destruction of everything you hold dear. You have to be careful. You have to be aware. You have to consider not just the immediate act, but the larger context, the subtle dynamics, the unspoken undercurrents that can transform even the most innocent gesture into something dangerous, something destructive, something deadly to the fragile bonds of trust and love. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, I learned that in relationships, in families, in life itself, be alert, not just trusting. Trust is vital, yes, but healthy relationships, strong families, stable lives, they also require awareness, open communication, honest conversation, and a willingness to address even the smallest, most subtle shifts in dynamics, even the slightest prickle of unease, before they escalate, before they fester, before they transform into something toxic, something destructive, something that can shatter everything you've built, everything you believe in, everything you thought was safe, stable, and unbreakable. Because sometimes the most dangerous betrayals, the most devastating heartbreaks, the most unimaginable losses start with something as simple, as innocent, as seemingly harmless as a helpful favor. Remember that. Please remember my story. Remember the painful truths I've learned, etched in the ruins of my own life. And maybe, just maybe, you can learn from my mistakes. Maybe you can be more alert, more aware, more cautious in your own life, in your own relationships. Maybe you can see the warning signs, heed the subtle whispers of intuition, and avoid the kind of devastating betrayal that started for me with something as simple, as innocent, as seemingly harmless, as a helpful favor. Thank you for listening to my confession. Please remember to share, like, and subscribe to this channel. Also, don't forget to turn on post notifications to be among the first to watch our videos. See you in the next video.